Galw'r aelodau.
I call the members to order, and the first item on our agenda this afternoon is questions to the First Minister, and the first question is from Mohammed Ashka.
Good afternoon, First Minister. What action is the Welsh Government taking to increase the value of exports to countries outside the European Union, please?
Well, we've long had a suite of support services designed to help Welsh companies to export their goods and services to all markets, both inside and outside of the EU, and these will continue to be available after we leave the EU.
Thank you very much for the reply, First Minister. Welsh Government figures show that exports from Wales to European Union for the year ending 2018 increased by 6.8% compared to previous year. However, export to non-EU countries increased only by 0.3%. Given the failure of Welsh Government to diversify its export destinations, what action will he take to take advantage of the trading opportunities presented by Brexit, and will he follow the recommendation of the Economic Committee and appoint a trade minister to sell Wales to the world, please?
Well, I remain to be convinced of what trade opportunities exist post-Brexit. I mean, for example, if you look at the top 5 export markets that we have, the top is Germany, second France, third the USA, fourth Ireland, fifth the Netherlands. Now, 4 of those countries are in the EU. If we look further down to the top 10, then we find a situation where 8 are either in the EU or the Customs Union. Now, clearly, these are our major export markets. They are markets that we must seek to protect, while at the same time looking to expand our markets elsewhere, which is why, of course, we've opened and are in the process of opening more offices around the world in order to raise Wales's profile abroad.
Caroline Jones.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, whilst it's true that currently the majority of Wales goods exports go to the EU, the growth prospects, regardless of Brexit, are not promising. The OECD, the World Bank and the IMF have all downgraded EU GDP growth forecast to around 1.5%, whereas China will see growth 5 to 10 times higher than that. So what specific steps is your government taking to capitalise on our growing trade with China and ensure that China becomes one of our major export markets for goods and services?
Well, China comes in at number 11 in terms of the countries that we export to. We have, of course, 3 offices in China, looking to open another one, and their job, of course, is to promote links in every way between Wales and China. We will look to expand Wales's presence in every market around the world, including that market which is closest to us, the European market.
Question 2, John.
Question 2, John Griffiths.
Will the First Minister make a statement on Welsh Government policy for industrial heritage in Newport?
Well, we're rightfully proud of our nation's rich industrial heritage. Over 1,000 industrial structures in Wales have statutory protection, including the iconic Grade 1 listed, of course, Newport Transporter Bridge, a truly significant historic structure, not only for Newport but for the whole of Wales.
Yes, First Minister, the Transporter Bridge, having been built at the turn of the 20th century, is one of just 6 working bridges in the world today. It was originally built to transport steel workers across the River Usk to their place of work, and it holds very many memories for local people. I remember being on a transport bridge, going to school games in primary school, standing on one leg when it bumped at the end to see if you could remain on one leg, walking over the top, and of course, history of the miners' strike when it was hijacked by striking miners, and when a USA businessman wanted to buy it, dismantle it, transport it to the States and reassemble it. So there are so many stories around that Newport Transporter Bridge, the tranny as it's known locally. And I'm glad that Welsh Government is increasingly recognising this. Friends of Newport Transporter Bridge have an important project with the Heritage Lottery Fund to safeguard its future. And David Ellis-Thomas, just the other week, in answering a question from my colleague Jane Bryant, committed to putting it at the forefront of Welsh Government policy for industrial heritage in Wales. I wonder if you could reinforce that Welsh Government commitment today, First Minister, and perhaps give a little bit more detail as to how it will be taken forward.
Well, my friend, the member for Newport, he suggested he walked over the bridge. Whether he was meant to do that or not, he doesn't explain further. But he's right to say, of course, that the bridge has played a huge part in Newport's history and is held with great affection in the hearts of the people of his constituency and indeed Newport West as well. What I can say is that the Minister has asked his officials to work closely with Newport Council to secure the project bridge by providing technical support and advice, and in helping to identify potential sources of funding to help meet the current funding shortfall for the bridge. And certainly I know the Minister has been asked to be kept fully informed of developments.
Mark Reckless.
I'm pleased to hear that Welsh Government will at least be supporting work to see if we can secure funding for the transporter bridge, and I hope may support it with its own funding depending on how that work progresses. I wonder though if I could ask the First Minister whether he'd also support the industrial heritage of Newport by funding an equally inspiring new bridge over Newport Docks for the M4 Relief Road.
Well, that is not within the portfolio of the Minister. I can assure him of that, and we will always look to ensure that the industrial heritage of Newport that is with us will continue to be protected.
Questions now from the party leaders. Leader of the UKIP Group, Gareth Bennett.
First Minister, there's been a lot of publicity recently over the issue of food labelling. As you'll be aware, there have been some tragic cases where people have died, quite possibly due to lack of information on the label of a food product that they consumed. Do you agree that, as a matter of course, there should be clear labelling for food products in Wales, so that all the relevant information is readily available? Yes. Thank you for that very definitive answer, and of course I entirely agree with you. Now, another related issue is the one of halal meat entering the mainstream food chain. As you know, halal meat, some 20% of which comes from animals which are not stunned before they are slaughtered, is a growth industry in the UK. One issue related to this is that halal meat is only allowed for religious reasons, so that its consumption should be confined to those who have a religious belief that they need to eat halal meat. In other words, halal meat consumption should be confined to practicing Muslims. But we know that increasingly food retailers are offering halal food as a normal part of their menu. Sometimes it is hard even to see the labelling of halal food as such. So you could enter a takeaway shop or a restaurant and find that you are eating food which you later discover to be halal, which was not clearly labelled as such on the menu. Is there a case that we need to adopt much more stringent measures over food labelling here in Wales, so that people who are not practising Muslims do not unwittingly end up eating halal food?
Well, I think people do understand and are able to make a choice. What should we have next? And should we insist that food is labelled kosher in order to, for people who are not Jewish to avoid eating that food? Should we label food, for example, so that it is acceptable to those who are Hindus, those who are Buddhists? Well, yes, we need to label food as accurately as possible, but I certainly don't take the view that somehow halal food should be singled out compared to other dietary regimes and other religions. You know, if you're going to suggest that about Muslims, are you going to suggest the same about Jews?
I take the point that you raise, First Minister, but there is no evidence that kosher food is entering the mainstream food market. But there is some evidence that halal food is. So that is the reason why I raised the issue specifically of halal food. Now, I don't think we should be downplaying this issue. I remember that we had a scandal over horse meat a few years ago, and I think that this lack of labelling of halal food has the potential to be, if anything, an even bigger scandal. Now, your government has talked about animal welfare in the past, and to be fair, you have done things in that line. The British Veterinary Association, the RSPCA, and other organisations have called for an end to the non-stun slaughter of animals in the UK, which they say is cruel and painful for the animals being slaughtered. There has also been considerable academic research backing up this view. Now, it has already been banned in Denmark, Sweden, Iceland and New Zealand. It is now UKIP policy to ban the practice of non-stun slaughter entirely here in the UK. Would you agree that that is actually the best policy for the interests of animal welfare in Wales?
No, I do regret the fact that he again singles out one religious group that he particularly dislikes. He starts with Muslims. He will move on to the Jewish people. He'll move on to Hindus, move on to Buddhists, because they're not exactly like him. And thankfully, they're not. Can you imagine the world of Gareth Bennett? The kind of world that it would be. The reality is that we are an open and tolerant society. We have in Cardiff one of the oldest mosques in Britain. The population that we have here of people who are Muslims have been integrated in our society for many, many, many decades and are respected for the contribution they have made to Welsh life. A contribution, I have to say, which goes well beyond that which UKIP or the members made.
Arweinydd Plaid
Plaid Cymru leader Adam Price.
First Minister, yesterday I was with the other First Minister of Scotland. Anyone who visits Scotland and the Scottish Government nowadays comes away with a sense of a country that is confident, a government that is effective and a leader that is respected in Scotland and further afield. Yesterday, when the Scottish First Minister called for any Brexit backstop affording Northern Ireland a special single market status, also to be extended to Scotland, it was reported as major news by all UK media. Do you, as First Minister of Wales, echo that demand for Wales? And when you speak on these matters, why does no one seem to take any notice?
I don't agree with what the First Minister of Scotland has said. I think all he do is shift the problem from the border in Ireland to the border between Scotland and England, where the problem is then transplanted. The real issue that we must keep sight of here, it's important that the UK and the Republic of Ireland are within the same customs union, have the same arrangements with regard to the single market.
First Minister, your claim to be a strong voice for Wales would carry some greater weight if it wasn't for the fact that you're leaving the office of First Minister at this most critical time in our history, and that within a matter of days of your announcing your intention to do so, your government, led by one of your would-be successors, in stark contrast to the courage of conviction shown by the Scottish Government, caved into Westminster in relation to your own Continuity Act. Now, seeing as you are supporting the Scottish Government in their action at the Supreme Court, can you confirm that any proposal to repeal your Continuity Act will be held in abeyance until a ruling is made? And if the court finds in favour of the Scottish Government, instead of ripping up the Act, will you declare your rather squalid deal with the Westminster Tory Government dead?
Well, I mean, the reality of the situation is this. I mean, it is axiomatic in Plaid Cymru that somehow the people of Wales are misguided because they don't vote for Plaid Cymru and for him as First Minister. The reality is they have put my party in power in every election in this Assembly, and the reality is that we sit here as a Labour-led government, of course, with others within this government. No, I don't agree with what Scotland has done. We have come to terms with the UK government. We expect those terms to be kept. And what happens if the Scots lose the Supreme Court battle? They have nothing. They have nothing. We have an agreement. The Scots will have no agreement at all. And that, we think, is a far better prospect as far as Wales is concerned, rather than effectively playing blackjack with the future of the Union.
You're being outflanked by the Scottish First Minister. You're even being outflanked. You're even being outflanked by Northern Ireland, who don't even have a First Minister or a government or an assembly. It's less of a surprise, perhaps, that you're being outshone by the government of the Republic of Ireland. After all, they're an independent state, and there may be a lesson for this there, First Minister. I was very pleased that Irish diplomats were able to confirm to me at the weekend that they will now be reopening the Irish consulate here in Cardiff. Are you able to confirm, First Minister, that your government? He laughs. He thinks it's amusing that actually this is an important development in terms. This is an important development in terms of our key partner here. Are you, as First Minister, able to confirm that you will reciprocate by opening an office for Wales in Dublin? And to be clear, I don't mean a desk tucked away in a corner of the British Embassy. And finally, First Minister, given the Irish economy last year grew around 3 times as fast as the rest of Europe and 5 times as fast as Wales, do you think that the Irish view with envy the economic success story that Wales within the Union has so evidently been, and deeply regret the economic catastrophe that independence has proven for them?
Well, first of all, we have an office in Dublin. He doesn't seem to know that. And the Scots, yes, it is in the embassy, but the Scots are there as well. I mean, the point is the Scots are also in embassies around the world, as are we. So the Scots have no problem with being inside British embassies when it suits them. So I don't see a problem with that as long as the presence is there. The consulate is coming to Cardiff because I kept on pushing for it. I raised it at every single meeting I had with Irish Government officials, with the Taoiseach himself and with Irish Government ministers, which is why it's come back to Cardiff after all the work that I did in persuading them to do that. Thirdly, yes, the Irish economy has grown, but from a base that was exceptionally low in 2008. Ireland was on its knees in 2008. The economy was wrecked. People were in huge debt. The banks were in a situation where they were going to fold. They were in a situation where the housing market had collapsed. Yes, things have improved, but I know Ireland very, very well. It does, do well economically. It's got a strong profile around the world because of its diaspora, but it has no health service. I mean, if you want to go to Ireland to get health cover, be my guest, because the health provision there is far, far, far inferior to what we have here. Things have to be paid for in Ireland that are free here. It's the reality, for example, that if you want to have a baby in Ireland, you pay. That's what happens there. The reality is the tax rates are higher, the cost of living is higher. Knowing Ireland as I do, I know that is the case. And he doesn't address this fundamental point. He is honest when he says, I am in favour of independence, because that's what his party stands for. I don't criticise him for that, I don't agree with him, but that is his position. But what he must address, surely, is the gap that we have between spending and revenue raising in Wales. There's a 25% gap. Now, that has to be addressed in terms of, if we were to become independent tomorrow, how would that be addressed? Where would the cuts be made? Where would he make those cuts? Because there wouldn't be growth overnight. Now, if he wants to make the case for independence, he must explain to the people of Wales where those cuts would occur. It's beyond debate that the revenue that we raise is less than what we spend. It's beyond debate, unless he's arguing that's not the case. Now, if that is the case, if we became independent, there's a gap there. How will that gap be filled?
Leader of the Opposition, Paul Davies.
First Minister, can you explain to the people of Wales why the new contract for delivering broadband services has still not been rolled out?
Well, that is a matter that we're taking up with BT. They are the only provider, of course. There's no competition in this market, and we are ensuring that BT will roll out that contract and provide the services that we've paid for.
Well, failing to roll out this new contract is another example of your government's failure. This is the latest in a long line of broken promises. And let me remind the First Minister that the Welsh Labour Party's 2011 election manifesto committed to ensure, and I quote, that all residential premises and all businesses in Wales will have access to next-generation broadband by 2015. Well, that is clearly another broken promise by your government. And I'm sure that members from all sides of the chamber will be able to give you examples of communities that are struggling with a substandard broadband service. Communities like Monachlog in Pembrokeshire, Molvrain, Conwy and Newcastle in Monmouthshire are just a few that are at the back of the broadband queue, making those communities much more isolated and disadvantaged compared to other parts of Wales. First Minister, where has it all gone wrong?
Well, first of all, we have 96% of premises that are connected to superfast broadband. Well, where are the Tory promises on this? I mean, if the Tories were in power, they'd have done nothing at all. There was no broadband offer from the Tories, nothing at all. Where is the UK government? Bear in mind, we've kept our promise in a matter that isn't even devolved. It's not even devolved. Once again, we have the Tory government in London saying Wales has to pay for something that actually it should pay for. Actually, this is infrastructure that should benefit the whole of the UK. But that is not the way the Conservative government sees it, because they are so obsessed with the market. For them, the market must determine everything. If we left that to happen in Wales, most of Wales would not have superfast broadband. We have intervened as a government, we put investment in, and that's why he raised it, because it's a shame that his own party has done so little.
You have broken your Assembly election manifesto. That is quite clear from what I've just quoted to you. And your party's manifesto not only committed to ensure that all residential premises and all businesses in Wales would have access to next generation broadband by 2015, but it went on to pledge that 50% of properties or more should have access to 100 megabytes per second. Now, we know the government will be making a statement on the new contract, but as we've come to expect from so many of the Welsh Government schemes, the implementation of this has slipped and slipped and slipped. This contract should have been in place at the beginning of this year. And whilst we are still waiting, school children like Greg Williams have to be driven a mile away from her home near Gwytherin in Conwy to find a signal to download schoolwork. And let me also remind the First Minister that the annual NFU Broadband and Mobile Survey also showed that 2/3 of NFU members asked in Wales said they were not able to access sufficient broadband speeds, which has a significant impact on their ability to do business effectively and efficiently. So with that in mind, First Minister, and in light of the very serious impact that the lack of adequate broadband provision is having on Welsh communities, will you now apologise for failing to meet your 2011 Assembly manifesto commitment? And will you also apologise to those people living without a decent broadband service in Wales for your government's failure to properly deal with this issue?
Well, first of all, mobile technology is certainly not devolved. That is something the UK government should be ensuring rolls out across the whole... Well, let me explain to him. There's a difference between mobile technology and broadband. He said mobile and broadband. Mobile is not devolved. Mobile phone technology and reception is a matter for the UK government. The reason why we have relatively poor coverage around the UK is because of the model that was adopted for mobile coverage in the first place. Too much money being paid to the UK government, not enough money then available to actually invest in the infrastructure. When it comes to broadband, he sits there as somebody from a party with no policy on this, but I've seen no policy at all. We have delivered for the people of Wales, in many, many communities up and down Wales, a broadband service that otherwise they would never, ever have had. I speak to businesses all around Wales who are able to access it. And he raised the 2011 manifesto. He raised the issue of school broadband. There is one promise that I know the people of Wales are delighted the Conservatives never had the opportunity to implement from their 2011 manifesto, and that was the 20% cut in education funding that they keep on forgetting about.
Question 3.
Question 3, Mandy Jones.
Diolch, Llywydd. Will the First Minister make a statement on animal welfare in North Wales?
Well, the Wales Animal Health and Welfare Framework Implementation Plan sets out Welsh Government priorities, and the Cabinet Secretary's oral statement in June set out plans to maintain and enhance companion animal welfare in Wales, and she'll make an oral statement on farmed animal welfare next month.
Thank you for that answer, First Minister. Finn's Law is currently making its way through the UK Parliament's legislative process. This law proposes to give special status to service animals, like police dogs and horses, where they are harmed, and removes the wiggle room around unnecessary suffering available to perpetrators under Section 4 of the Animal Welfare Act 2006. I understand this change will come before the Assembly for consideration. First Minister, will your government please support Finn's Law?
Well, these are matters that I know the Minister is looking at, and she will seek to look favourably in terms of implementing that law, but these are matters the Minister will deal with in due course.
Mark Isherwood.
I'm sure you'll join me in congratulating the winners of RSPCA Cymru's Community Animal Welfare Footprint Awards in North Wales, Conwy Council, Denbighshire Council, Wrexham Council, Ynys Council and Clwyd Allen Housing Association and Cartrefi Cymunedol Gwynedd also. And also in acknowledging the delivery of animal welfare through local authorities being an important requirement of those local authorities. How, therefore, do you feel we should respond to concern raised with me this summer when I went out with an RSPCA inspector in Denbighshire about the recent spate of animal injuries in the areas caused by air rifles and crossbows?
Well, that's deeply distressing. First of all, I join him, of course, in congratulating the local authorities involved. Well, where, of course, animals have been injured with weapons, people should have no compunction in reporting the matter to the police. I know that after the event has occurred, it's far more difficult to track down the culprits. But where there is a pattern of behaviour in a particular area, at some point in time, those people will make a mistake, and quite often they get caught. But it's deeply distressing, of course, for those who own pets, and I would encourage them to, even if they think that nothing will happen, I'd encourage them to register the issue with the police and report it as a crime.
Michelle Brown.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, I see that England, the government in England is introducing a ban on third-party puppy sales. I just would like to know from you, I mean, you're saying now that you're going to consider it. How long are you going to continue trying to regulate the misery instead of banning it outright?
The Minister plans to make an announcement on that before the end of term.
Pedwar, Jenny Rathbone.
Question 4, Jenny Rathbone.
What assessment has the First Minister made of the Future Generations Commissioner's report, Transport Fit for Future Generations?
Well, the Commissioner's sentiment on the benefits of investing in public transport, as well as walking and cycling infrastructure, is of course echoed by the Government, and the Cabinet Secretary responded to the Commissioner on the 28th of September.
Thank you, First Minister. You'll be aware, I hope, that what the Future Generations Commissioner's report has highlighted is that a M4 relief road would actually increase the numbers using the M4 by 42,000 vehicles a day, increasing the emissions by 500,000 tonnes. Given the extent of the congestion and pollution problem that my constituents are suffering, I'm extremely concerned that this relief road would increase the number of people commuting into Cardiff and indeed Newport by car. I'm struck by the argument from the Future Generations Commissioner that a much smaller sum of less than 600 million on public transport and active travel would actually resolve the congestion problem at a fraction of the price. And I wondered if you would be able to give us your views on that argument.
It's not clear how that would operate. I mean, some of the things that I've seen would be the installation of bus lanes on the motorway. Of course, there need to be buses that would run on the lanes, and in some parts of it, dual carriageway. We can't have a single-lane motorway, clearly. Preventing people getting onto the motorway was one suggestion that was made. Moving freight onto the rails, which of course we want to support, but it's easier said than done, particularly goods traffic, because there are very few goods yards now. Now, I take on board, of course, very much what she says about congestion. It will get worse. There's no question about that. When the 7 tolls go, there will be an effect on the tunnels, and I think we are deceiving ourselves if we think that the situation will improve in the near future. So there has to be a solution. From my perspective, the decision that I'll be asked to take is, should it be the black route or not? And that is something, of course, I have an open mind on, because I've not yet seen the planning inspector's substantial report on this matter.
David Melding.
The Commissioner also said, and I quote, the black route is particularly weak on the criteria set out in the Wellbeing Future Generations Act. I think this is a key moment. I'm quite neutral on what the decision should be. I think there are arguments on both sides. But it's clearly going to be a key moment for the application of this Act for long-term projects and policies. And I do hope the government will have some sort of method of responding in detail if it has to establish that it may be, in terms of the criteria set out, a decision that is not altogether aligned with it. At least that would take the Act seriously. Or is it your position that the Commissioner is wrong in making the assessment she has on this?
It's a shame that the Commissioner didn't give evidence to the inquiry, because, of course, this evidence then could have been tested, and she would be able to explain the basis upon which that evidence was given. It was produced after the inquiry had finished, which is perhaps not the most helpful way of doing it, but we will nevertheless take into account, of course, what the Commissioner has said and all relevant factors regarding the decision. The decision itself is not an easy decision, but it has to be taken one way or another. But the assurance I give members is that I will take into account all relevant factors before coming to a conclusion.
Question 5.
Question 5, Dai Lloyd. Thank you, Llywydd. Will the First Minister make a statement on regeneration plans in South Wales West?
Well, the Welsh Government Regeneration Investment supports schemes that create jobs, enhance skills and employability, and delivers the right environment for businesses to grow and thrive and ensure prosperity is spread in to all parts of Wales.
But on numerous occasions, the Swansea Bay Tidal Lagoon has the potential to not only help us in Wales to increase our renewable energy generation, but also to provide a much-needed boost to the economy of the whole of South West Wales. Now, there's been talk of Welsh Government investment, and a task force has been established by Swansea Bay City Region to look at this in greater depth. However, in terms of ownership models, will you confirm whether the Welsh Government would consider creating a Welsh energy company to take this project forward? When are you expecting the task force to conclude its work, and when do you envisage making a decision on your government's role in this whole scheme?
Well, the first thing that has to be established is the market, and particularly, of course, the strike price. These things are hugely important in terms of determining the viability of the project. Now, what the UK government didn't do is look at the contract for difference and the strike price in terms of making the lagoon viable. It decided it would pay more money for other forms of energy. So the first thing that has to be established is the market. There is a way of doing that by working with local authorities and others, and I know that Swansea City Council is looking at alternative ways of funding the lagoon, and we want to see what those ideas are, of course, and we will work with them if there is a viable project that can move forward after the UK government's unwelcome decision, and that is something that we will continue to work with them on.
Susie Davies.
Diolch, Llywydd. Well, both Swansea and Cardiff, of course, are benefiting from some regeneration work at the moment, not least through the City deal. But Bridgend, as you know, is on the very edge of the City deal footprint for Cardiff. And while Bridgend taxpayers are handing over £11 million or more for the project, residents are starting to ask me now, where's the benefit in it for them? They're asking in Port Paul as well. Specifically, they're asking, does Welsh Government expect further investment in Bridgend train station or the long-promised Brackler train station? And do you think that this city deal should be regenerating Bridgend town centre, not just the city centres, maybe be the catalyst for that partial depedestrianisations that, as you know, traders are very keen to see happen?
Well, first of all, Bridgend railway station has only just been refurbished, of course, as you will know, and very well. There was a real problem there with congestion when trains were coming in and passengers not being able to get through the gate. So that's very much welcome. In terms of the town itself, well, Vibrant and Viable Places has had an impact on the town. The redevelopment of the Rue car park into what is now a gym, a car park and residential accommodation. That will bring more people living in the town, and so providing the footfall the town needs in the day and the evening. We have the Business Improvement District as well, that I know has been welcomed by town traders. And indeed, in fairness, there are a number of events now happening in the town centre. Those events are drawing people in, and that's something I very much welcome. She does mention the partial depedestrianisation. It is something personally that I support, but only that bit. Because I remember what the town was like when there was traffic. But I think properly done, it's possible to have a route through the town that doesn't cause danger to others, that doesn't let people linger either in car parking spaces, but allows people to stop, collect, go, or stop, drop off, go. And I know that's something the council are keen to do and are looking to develop a bid in order to do so.
David Rees.
Yeah. First Minister, obviously economic regeneration depends on many issues. In those 7 constituencies across South West West, including Abergavenny, transport is a big issue to ensure that we can attract businesses and bring investment in. Now, there's been a report of the Welsh Government on the M4 pollution matters, which gives a proposal to the Welsh Government to consider closing Junction 41. Last time it did that, there was traffic chaos in my constituency, and that would not attract businesses to come, because that chaos happened at peak times and would cause huge disruption to businesses. Can you reaffirm the position that given by the Cabinet Secretary 2 years ago to actually keep that road open, and the Welsh Government will not close Junction 41 and put the traffic chaos back again in the people of Talbot?
Well, this is a matter that's still, I believe, under consultation, and of course, as happened last time around, there will be full consideration given to the comments that people make.
Question 6, Lynn Neal.
Question 6, Lynn Eagle.
Will the First Minister provide an update on the impact of universal credit in Torfaen?
Well, people are struggling, not just in Torfaen but elsewhere, because of the complexities of universal credit. The UK Government has to address these issues urgently before they proceed with any managed migration of existing benefit payments to universal credit.
Well, First Minister, Torfaen has had more than a year now of the full service rollout of universal credit. In that year, we have seen people waiting 6 to 8 weeks for payment, an increase in debt and rent arrears, more and more people needing to use food banks, and a universal credit helpline where people are literally waiting hours to speak to a member of staff. I believe the local record in Torfaen is 4 hours, with most people, especially vulnerable people, giving up in that time. Will you join me in paying tribute to the excellent coalition we've got of Torfaen Council, Torfaen CAB, Track 2 and housing providers who are all working so hard to get people through this universal credit maze? But will you also join me on calling the UK Government to recognise that it's time to stop this now and sort out these problems before it causes any more suffering?
Well, first of all, can I add my thanks and congratulations, of course, to the fine example of cooperative working that we've seen there, helping people who are most vulnerable at a time when they need to know which direction to go in and to find out exactly what they're entitled to. But yes, it's quite clear to me and to many in this chamber that universal credit, as it currently stands, has not worked. And it's absolutely crucial that where there is a problem, that problem is sorted rather than sorting it after more people have suffered. And that's unfortunately the situation that we find ourselves in now.
Mohammed Ashkar.
First Minister, IFF Research recently carried out a survey of universal credit claimants on behalf of DWP. They found evidence of positive employment outcomes for universal credit claimants, with a near doubling of proportion of claimants being in a paid role after 8 months into their claim. They also reported an increase in the number of hours worked and in overall income levels. Does the First Minister recognise that universal credit is tackling ingrained worklessness in areas such as Torfaen, and as a result, people are moving into work faster? Thank you.
Well, should I be surprised that the department that has the responsibility for universal credit has commissioned a survey to say it's fine? I would have questions as to the objectivity. I don't know more about it, but the objectivity of such a survey. But let me say this to him. The real effect of universal credit is this. Community Housing Cymru recently reported that housing association tenants on universal credit in Wales are already over £1 million worth of debt in terms of rent arrears. According to their survey, a sampling of 29 housing associations in Wales, that survey was conducted with 3,475 people living in housing association homes in Wales. And that shows that each person is, on average, £420 worse off because of rent arrears. That's the reality of the situation when it comes to universal credit, and that's why it has to be halted and reversed.
Question 7, Mark.
Question 7, Mark Reckless.
What is the Welsh Government's assessment of the impact of a customs or regulatory border in the Irish Sea?
Well, our assessment is set out in securing Wales's future.
First Minister, you spoke eloquently last week about the importance of Northern Ireland and its peace process for Brexit. Doesn't the European Commission proposing a border of any sort in the Irish Sea act as a red rag to a bull for the unionist community in Northern Ireland? And shouldn't it instead apply its technical work for de-dramatising that proposed border to agreeing a free trade deal for the UK as a whole?
Well, I think the answer is to have a deal that works for both sides. I've said that many, many times, and members will know my view as to what that would look like. I think it's right to say that the suggestion of any kind of apparent political border between the island of Ireland and the island of Great Britain is anathema to the unionist parties, and that's something that we've seen, of course. There are occasions, of course, where there's a great deal of cross-border cooperation. So when it comes to animal health, Ireland is one photo-sanitary unit. Northern Ireland is, in effect, not in the UK as far as that's concerned. And if you go to Northern Ireland, you are asked whether you're carrying food products. That makes sense from an animal health perspective. But no, I don't think that's workable. It would be very difficult for a UK government to agree to that. The unionist parties would not agree to it. What is the answer then? Well, as I've said many, many times before, stay in the customs union. The whole thing's resolved then.
Rhina Piorwerth.
Thank you. Speaking on Channel 4 News over the past few days, the Deputy Prime Minister of the Republic of Ireland, Simon Coveney, said that it was ridiculous to argue that one could avoid a hard border if there is a no-deal Brexit. He said that 1,077 additional customs officials and veterinary inspectors and security officers would need to be employed in airports and ports to deal with trade east to west. Isn't it inevitable in such circumstances that huge damage will be done to trade through the port of Holyhead in my constituency? And doesn't that demonstrate how irresponsible the supporters of a hard Brexit are within the Conservative Party, and how irresponsible Labour and the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn has been in not having insisted from the outset that there would have to be membership of the single market and the customs union?
Well, of course, nobody argues that there should be any kind of hard border between the Republic of Ireland and the United Kingdom. Nobody's saying that they wish to see that. But, of course, the risk is that that might happen without any kind of deal. And in the days pre the single market, there were checks at Holyhead. If I remember rightly, not everybody was checked, but there weren't any kind of passport checks at all. But there is a risk in this, of course, because, as I said before, because if it's easier to get through the Northern Ireland ports rather than the Welsh ports, then of course trade will be impacted because of that, and it will have a negative impact on the Welsh ports trade. And so once again, what is the answer? Well, the answer is to remain within the customs union and to keep the access to the single market.
What is the Welsh Government doing to tackle mental health problems in young people?
Well, we're working with our partners to deliver a whole system improvement to the mental health support provided to young people, building on our successful work and investments since 2015, and delivering, of course, on our Prosperity for All commitments.
This is not the first time I've raised this subject with you, but after the recent Panorama programme on mental health provision for young people, I was inundated with messages from parents in the Rhondda who feel that their children and teenagers have been let down by the system. The programme certainly touched a nerve, First Minister. One thing that could help is for school counselling services to be improved. Now, it's a statutory requirement for secondary schools in Wales to have an in-house counsellor, but provision remains patchy according to the Children's Society. They say that some schools provide an excellent service, while some schools provide no counselling services at all. This is an area under your control, First Minister. Many children and teenagers are being failed by the health service primarily, but also they're being failed within the education system as well. So will you commit to evaluating the service to make sure that there is a high-quality service, that it is good and consistently provided for all secondary school pupils right throughout the country?
Well, I'd be extremely disappointed if secondary schools weren't providing the service that they're meant to provide. I think I've said in the chamber before how much money we put into CAMS, but I think where the emphasis has to go now, and what we're looking at, is what happens in that gap between the counselling services and CAMS. Many young people won't go and see a counsellor in school because it's a little bit too close to home, and people think that people will find out about it. And many young people don't actually need the kind of medical intervention that CAMS provides. So the emphasis now is going to be on how do we provide a level of counselling service outside of school for those who would benefit from that service without having to go into CAMS. So, as far as the 2019 to 20 draft budget proposals are concerned, they do include further planned investment in CAMS, but that will be targeted at meeting the needs of those who don't need the most specialist treatment and meet the needs of that missing middle. I think that's where we have to ensure that no gap exists.
Janet Finch-Saunders.
First Minister, October 10th is World Mental Health Day, and I'm sure that you would want to join me in offering our full support and gratitude to the many mental health service providers and charities who help our vulnerable people across Wales every day. However, suicide rates in Wales, and particularly amongst young people, are a very serious issue. Childline Cymru reporting a 20% increase in the number of calls it receives from children and young people suffering with suicidal thoughts and feelings. And what more worryingly, of late, children as young as 10 are now contacting these services. Will the First Minister make a statement on what action the Welsh Government is taking to reduce levels of suicide in children and young people, and what services it is providing to charities such as Childline Cymru in dealing with the rise of the number of cases?
I remember some years ago there was a spate of suicides in Bridgend. I'm sure the member will remember it. Stoked, I have to say, with the media coverage of the time, which there's no doubt in my mind led to some young people taking their own lives. And that was a very difficult time for the people of Bridgend, and not just the town, but the entire county. So I've seen what can happen when there is a panic in terms of suicides. I had to deal with that myself in my own constituency. In terms of what Childline Cymru, what's not clear, and never can be clear with these things, is does that mean that there are more young people who are feeling suicidal, or does it mean there are more young people who are reporting the issue, even though the numbers may well be steady? We can't know the answer to that question, but either answer is possible. She asked particularly what we're doing for young people. Well, again, we have school counselling. We have the money that we put into CAMS, and it is right to say that the waiting list for CAMS was unacceptably long at one point. It was 112 days at one point, now it's 28 days from referral. So performance has improved significantly since 2017, but of course more work needs to be done now in, as I said earlier on, plugging the gap between the school counselling services and the specialist medical help or psychiatric help that CAMS can provide. You know, what then can we do for those who fall between the gap at the moment?
Thank you, First Minister. The next item.